Hey everyone, this is Gabbi
and Karim,
and you're listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Allied to Health.
Tune in each week to hear us talk about the journey of getting into med school.
From GAMSAT to medical interviews, get the insider scoop from med students who have done it all before. So stay tuned and get ready to get med ready. Hello everyone and welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be back, everyone. And I'd like to start off the podcast with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We are currently in Yorta Yorta land. We'd like to pay their respects to their elders past, present and emerging and recognise that their sovereignty was never ceded.
Thank you for that, Karim. So today's episode is all about Section 3 of the GAMSAT. So we've spoken about Section 1, we've spoken about Section 2, now on to the final worst section of the GAMSAT.
Or arguably one of the best, depending on how you view it. So yeah, this is part 3 of a 3-part series, obviously, where we talk about the GAMSAT and we break down, how to approach it, how to study for it. But we'll start off with our experience with Section 3 and how we actually went. So, Gabbi, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, if you hadn't noticed, I hate Section 3. I've come to just appreciate it now, but that's probably because I'm not studying for the GAMSAT myself anymore. But it really was my weakest section, and to be honest, was part of the reason why I had zero confidence into getting into med. Because the first time I sat my GAMSAT when I was in second year of my undergraduate degree, I actually got 49 on Section 3, so below
out of
50.
100.
Is it out of 100?
It is out of 100.
Okay, all right.
But it's not a percentage as well. No. But
I don't really know how they do the marks, actually.
Yeah, no one knows.
Yeah.
It's all secret. It's all a mystery.
But anyway, you have to get above 50.
Yeah. Every uni requires you to get above 50 across each section to even be considered.
Yeah, so 50 is the absolute minimum that I was aiming for. And getting 49, being so close yet so far, but still it was a real kick in the guts, I think, at that stage of my study. And I thought I didn't do well, but I didn't think I did that badly. But in the end it was fine. I sat the GAMSAT again and got a good enough score to get into medicine, but I did get into the medicine at the University of Melbourne, who luckily for me do not double weight Section 3, unlike all other universities.
Well, let's address that really quickly. So a lot of universities will double weight Section 3, which means that when they're adding up the scores for your overall GAMSAT score, they'll consider Section 1 and Section 2 with one part, and then the Section 3 score will be multiplied by 2 and then all divided by 4, essentially. So there's a greater weighting for the Section 3 component of it. So yeah, it's a real advantage if you can do well in Section 3, because it will help sort of carry up the other 2 sections if you're not as good at them.
And I think the reason why the University of Melbourne chose not to double weight Section 3 was because they had scientific prerequisites, like certain subjects that you needed to have done in your undergraduate degree to be considered for medicine at the University of Melbourne. I think that is the reason behind it. That might be changing now, not sure. But anyway, it was great for me that they didn't double weight it, because Section 1 and 2 were much stronger for me than Section 3. But yeah, a lot of my study for my second GAMSAT sitting was focused on Section 3 because I struggled so much with it. And I actually quite like having these conversations with students, because I feel like a lot of the time tutors can automatically be just like sort of good at something, so it can then be like hard to relate as a student tutor to them if they were automatically good at it and they're tutoring you for that. I don't tutor Section 3, but I do talk to students about Section 3 just because, to give them some perspective on how I tackled it as my weakness, but also hopefully showing that there may be a light at the end of the tunnel, the long, long, dark, scary tunnel of Section 3. What about you?
Yeah, I didn't find it too bad.
Classic.
Yeah, it was probably the section I studied for the least, but it ended up being the one I did the best in.
That's so annoying. I hate you so much.
Yeah, no. But it's just, it's... I had a physics and math background from high school, even into uni and my undergraduate. So like that component of like the math, which is probably what a lot of people don't like about section 3, like that was fine for me. So I didn't have much trouble with that. Like where I really struggled though was the chemistry component of it. So we'll talk about this a bit more, but section 3 is made up of 3 different parts, like biochemistry and physics. And the stems now tend to sort of combine a bit, but I guess for me, like chemistry was a real struggle. So I did have to study a bit for that, and I didn't have much of a chemistry background, so it was all really new stuff to me.
And I feel like your math background just gave you the ability to be able to problem solve as well, which is such a big thing for section 3. And I think if you don't have those sort of skills on, you know, how to approach tricky questions and things like that, it can make it harder, which I definitely didn't have those skills. All that I had was from what I had from my undergrad, which is, you know, enough, but not enough at the same time.
So let's talk a bit about section 3, what it actually is, structure and timing. So it's made up of 75 questions, so you have to complete them in 150 minutes with 8 minutes reading time, so 142 minutes of writing time or answering time, I suppose.
Has that changed, that structure?
No, that's the same.
That's the most recent.
That's the most recent structure. So you actually get about 2 minutes a question, which is actually really good.
That's
not what we had.
No, we had 110 questions.
In 180 minutes, I think. Which was ridiculous. It was also like the longest section, and it was at the end, and it was like already 2 o'clock at that stage, and you ended up leaving the... because all of this was in person back when we did it, not online or anything. So you ended up leaving the venue by like 6 p.m. and you were just dead. But anyway, every question that you'll get is multiple choice, which is really good because you know that the correct answer is in there somewhere. And even if you don't know, you can just have a guess. And essentially the structure of it is that you're given a STEM. So it'll be a scientific STEM. As we mentioned, it'll be either bio, chem, or physics. But I think a lot of students are reporting nowadays you actually might get a bit of a mix between the different sections. So it might be like biochem, biophysics, and so on, or physics chem.
Which sounds scary, but does that mean it's a harder question if they've done that?
No, it's all of the STEMs are designed so that you only need a certain amount of prerequisite knowledge to be able to interpret the STEM. But everything required to actually answer the question should be given to you in the STEM. It's all new information, but it's new to everyone unless that person happened to have studied that really specific niche topic previously.
Right. Sorry, we should have said in the beginning as well, Karim is head of Section 3 at Allied, hence why I'm going to ask him most of the questions and he will provide most of the info. And I'll just be here as sort of, I think, a student perspective, I would be. Yeah.
Nice.
So what's the point of Section 3, Karim? Why does it exist in the GAMSAT?
So as a doctor or a physician, dentist, you're going to need to be able to absorb information really quickly because you get a lot of information thrown at you in medical school or dental school. So it's really important that you develop the skill of being able to interpret data really quickly and efficiently. And that's essentially what Section 3 is you're being thrown a lot of information at you, lots of different stems, lots of different types of new puzzles and things that you have to interpret, and you have to make reasonable logical inferences and interpretations based on those scientific stems. It's a really challenging skill, but it's definitely a skill worth developing because you use it a lot throughout your study, and so I think that's the reason why they test it. Now you might argue, like, you know, if I want to go into medical school, why do I need to know about physics? Like, why do I need this like physics background? And honestly, like, I think there is a fair argument there. Would you agree? Like, do you really need to know that much about physics?
Like, I think you could probably get by, but I also think it's about just being able to problem solve and how you digest big chunks of information that is really convoluted and confusing and how to work with that in a problem. But there definitely is aspects of biochem, physics, math, it all in medicine. So it is good to have a foundation in those.
Yeah, and, you know, perhaps like forces and Newton's laws don't come up that much in medicine.
Patients talk about it all the time.
If they ever do. But it's a test that's in place at the moment, and I guess a big part of medicine is they make you jump through a lot of hoops, and this is just another hoop you have to jump through.
Yeah.
To get into medical school.
Yeah, and I think it seems really unachievable, Section 3, especially if you've set the GAMSAT before and not got an ideal mark. It can just seem really overwhelming because, having to study for bio, chem, physics, math, organic chem versus non-organic chem. I don't even know what the other one is.
Yeah, I think it is.
Inorganic? I don't know. Yeah. Whatever.
Structural chemistry.
Structural chemistry. There's so many different things, especially if you didn't do it in high school as well. It can seem like you have to catch up on 3 or 4 years.
I think the hardest bit would be being a non-scientific background and then being faced with this overwhelming, I don't even know what a force is, for example, going into Section 3.
Yeah.
That can be really overwhelming.
And they do say that you should have a background of, year 12 physics?
Yeah, so we can talk about this. So the recommendation that they make in the GAMSAT booklet, which is produced by ASA run the GAMSAT, as many of you probably know. The recommendation is that you should have year 12 physics knowledge, undergraduate knowledge of biology, and first year undergraduate knowledge of chemistry.
And do you agree with that?
No, because so many people I know did arts degrees, did a little bit of science prerequisites, and managed to get by. So many people I didn't do chemistry in first year. Maybe that's why I struggled the most with chemistry.
Maybe.
So yeah, it depends. I don't think you have to have done them. I think you can come from any point, do the required study that you'll need to do, and manage to catch up.
Yeah, I think that's just a blanket term because it's easy to say that, and that be sort of a target for people to go to.
And then you can't complain.
Yeah,
that's what they're looking for, really. They just don't want anyone to complain that
about
it's
it being too hard. Yeah.
Or they I didn't know this, and they'll be like, oh, here are the prerequest knowledge that you need to have.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
but I guess it is a good I see the positive in it because it is a good outline for people as a vague sort of outline of what they might want to cover in their study. However, I don't recommend getting a year 12 physics book out and learning it or anything like that. I think definitely take that advice with a grain of salt. Use it as a recommendation, but I didn't do year 12 physics. I did year 12 bio and chem, and obviously biomed, so I don't know if that counts as, bio or chem first year undergraduate level. But I definitely didn't have any exposure of physics since year 9 or something, and I was still able to get by with just, a little bit of extra work, but I didn't get a year 12 textbook out or anything like that and work through it.
No, definitely not, and we're definitely not recommending that.
No.
We'll go into study tips in a second, but I think you really need to balance your study in the GAMSAT. You got 3 different sections to study for, and Section 3 is just another one of them. And you need to utilize your time appropriately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll just get overwhelmed, and you'll probably study stuff that won't come up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of that study tips, I think, the biggest thing and something that we've said with all 3 sections is practice, practice, practice. But not just practice. My favourite saying, perfect practice makes perfect. So making sure that, you're practicing with lots of different STEM types. You're not just practicing the one thing. Make sure you focus on your weaknesses, but also enhance your strengths at the same time. And look at different types of bio stems, for example, really long wordy stems versus, maybe a graph interpretation, maybe a biochem, maybe a biophysics. And then looking at different things, different STEM types. So what there is diagrams, graphs, written. What else is there, Karim? I can't even remember.
And then chemistry ones, so structural chemistry, pattern recognition.
Yep.
A lot of pattern recognition. They're probably the major ones. There's a few other ones, and there's ones that will combine things. So say you'll have a bit of text, and then you'll have a graph and a diagram, and you might have to interpret the whole lot all together.
Yeah.
And so that's why when we talk about our intensives at Hallad, which go into teaching how to approach the GAMSAT, we always talk about a skills-based approach. So really you're trying to develop your interpretation skills in particular and your problem-solving skills in addressing these question types, because there is no point going and learning about some really niche physics concept that might never come up if you don't have the skills to tackle another niche physics thing that comes up that you have never seen before. So it's about, addressing things you've never seen before, learning really quickly, problem-solving skills, and just building those skills up.
And being able to not freak out if you get some really convoluted text, which is the same in all 3 sections, really. Being able to expose yourself enough to the different resources and different things that might come up so that whatever you get on the day won't freak you out. But Karim, if someone, isn't from a science background or is really struggling with, the sciences, we talk about like getting back to the basics, but this is a really hard thing to balance, as we've already mentioned. So any advice on that?
Yeah, so a lot of time we talk to students about potentially doing like a course that will help them catch up on some of the relevant skills. So at HUD we run a Head Starter course, which we usually run prior to the GAMSAT, so 1 or 2 months prior to the GAMSAT. So they usually happen in January, and I want to say like August or July.
For the September
sitting.
Yeah.
And basically we just run through, how to approach all the basic knowledge that you need to have for like section 3, but also for section 1 and 2. Just so that you're going in there with enough knowledge that you feel like you're not out of depth with everyone else who might have come from a scientific background. So that's one option, so doing a course. And
you can do the Head Starter course even if you are from a scientific background. Like, I think it would have been useful for me to do just to get my confidence up, if anything else, and also to help with things like physics and math, which I hadn't touched in quite a while.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, if you are someone who like really struggles but you don't want to do a course, you could go through some practice exams and figure out where it is that you struggle. So this is but talking about using reflection in your study, which is something I recommend that you do anyway, but it's reflecting enough so that okay, this topic about, say, forces, which comes up in physics all the time, I do need to have some basic knowledge about that because it comes up all the time. Or, acids and bases in chemistry, like that comes up fairly regularly. So it'd be really good if I had some background knowledge that I can rely on if it does come up. I think that's a really good tip. And I think I'd give that tip to anyone who's really struggling with section 3s. Figure out what questions come up or what topics come up again and again. And then I think those topics are worth having a little bit of knowledge about, so if they do come up, you're not too overwhelmed.
For example, I really struggled with graphs, not your standard graphs, but like the three
graphs, three axis graphs.
Yeah. I really, really struggled with that. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So I looked up different YouTube videos and used Khan Academy to help guide my sort of understanding of that. And for me, that was worthwhile because it was, it was skill-based, but then also whatever topic came up that was sort of presented in this graph-like format, I felt more comfortable. So I definitely recommend doing that. As well as timing. Timing's really hard in section 3, but as we've discovered, it's a bit better this time around, but still a hurdle for a lot of students. So making sure you have timed practice. So doing these mock exams and these practice question sets to time, and really trying to mimic the exam environment as much as you can, because it is the last leg of the exam. So you're going to be tired. Now it's in person again, from what we've heard, with all 3 sections on the one day. You're going to experience the same sort of hurdles of fatigue and post-lunch drowsiness as well, which is really hard. So practicing doing section 3 when fatigued as well, I think, is really important. Yeah,
definitely a really good tip. And yeah, just as Gabby mentioned, using lots of resources like Khan Academy, YouTube videos, etc. They're really useful for figuring out what you do and don't know and what you need to practice on. The other thing that's really useful is doing lots of practice questions. So the ASA practice questions are really good, obviously, just because they most closely mimic the actual GAMSAT.
Yeah.
And I recommend leaving those questions till right before you sit the GAMSAT. Mock exams, so you can find those everywhere, but we really highly recommend our ones, obviously. So they're made by GAMSAT Section 3 tutors, all of whom are medical students. So they've sat the GAMSAT before, they know what it's like. They've designed Section 3 stems to really mimic the mock exams as much as possible. So they're a really good, accurate reflection of them. And then, just other courses like our intensives, they'll have practice questions in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have free events like our mini mocks and things like that. So keep an eye on our Facebook page for that. But if you have missed them this season, you can check out our YouTube because they have recordings of all of our events there, and you can see which questions we went through, and the tutors run through some explanations for them as well. But in terms of myths for Section 3, I feel like we've myth busted throughout this entire episode. But the main sort of ones that I really want to highlight is that this myth that you have to be from a science background to do well, definitely not true. We know people who are not from a science background that were still able to do well by having really reflective, focused, effective study. Again, study smarter, not harder. And then alternatively, if you are from a science background, you will automatically do well without study. Obviously, some people that is the case for them. But for example, me, I technically did come from a science background, being a biomed undergrad. But the first time I sat the GAMSAT with a little bit of study, I didn't do no study. I didn't do well. So don't just rely on your science background. It is a lot of problem solving, and it's not just like the exams that you get in undergrad, the science exams. It's nothing like that.
It's so weird. Yeah. It's not about what you know. It's about how you work through problems.
Exactly.
It really is. It really is a test of skills, not so much a test of knowledge.
And that's the other sort of myth that we thought it tests assumed knowledge.
Or that you have to memorize formulas. Really big myths. Definitely not. It's all about how you approach the exam and the skills that you develop in the process of studying.
All the information you need to answer the question is on that page. You just need to figure out how to find that information.
Or even just getting good at eliminating the options that you think are just completely wrong, and then just maximizing, because the answer is on there. It's one of the MCQs. That's the beauty of an MCQ. It's one of the options is right.
Yeah, exactly. You got to just figure out which one it is, and it might come down to just I remember one question I did. It was like a math or a physics question, but all 4 answer options were the same numbers, but the decimal place was just in a different spot. So I just had to figure out which spot was correct for the decimal place. And I was just thinking, right, what would make the decimal point be here? What would make the decimal point be there? Times by 100, divide by 100, what? And then I worked backwards from that. So that required no prior knowledge, I guess, except for knowing numbers.
Knowing how to divide and multiply.
Yeah, so maybe there is a little bit of assumed knowledge, but all of the information was on that page. You just need to really be able to sift through it, find out what's important, and sort of put your blinders on as well to not get confused or distracted by anything else on the page.
Aside from that, I think that's pretty much it for everything in the GAMSAT. I'm sure people will have more questions. If you want to reach out to us, definitely feel free to email the Hallard page, info@hallardtohealth.org. And our personal emails are in the show notes as well. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this mini-series, just breaking down the different sections. We were surprised we hadn't done this before, so hopefully it is helpful for everyone. And we can revisit it at a later date if we've missed things, but we just really wanted to focus on the high yield crux of everything to try and just put your minds at ease and help you plan your study. And the GAMSAT is just around the corner now, actually. Yeah.
So
not soon. We're recording this on Feb 27, 2022.
2022. So good luck to everyone that's sitting the GAMSAT in March 2022. Everyone. Yeah, and the future. But specifically for March 2022, because that's coming up. Stay focused. Try not to burn out in the last couple of weeks of study, because that's such a common thing, and that's the worst thing you can do for your performance. So make sure you're taking breaks and back yourself.
And stay hydrated.
Yeah, stay hydrated. Always stay hydrated. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this episode and this mini-series. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Making of an Incredible MD podcast by Allied to Health. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word about our podcast. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So send us an email or message on Facebook. All of our links are in the show notes. Thanks. We'll see you next time.